Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and excited for our guest tonight, Sarah Gamm. She was part of the UAP Task Force. She was an analyst, looked at videos and pictures, things like that. Very interesting background. Real excited to have her, like I say. Just a couple of things here. Our blog this week is a 1978 UFO occupant from Italy. Another great one by Charles Lear. Check that out over at podcastufo.com. And I want to thank everyone that helps out with the show. I appreciate that. I appreciate every listener, of course. And just a couple of things. I always like to, every once in a while, put in a fun little tidbit. I was contacted from someone from a lighthouse society. It's kind of a very interesting story. And that is that my father was a lighthouse keeper, and he got lonely at night. He was out in this rock way out in the ocean, and he got lonely at night, and he called the operator. Long story short, that was my mother. They ended up falling in love, and it was my mother. Anyway, it's a nice little story. So I was contacted for someone in the Lighthouse Society that wanted to talk about that story, wanted me to be on their podcast. I said, sure. And I said, well, I do a podcast. And so he said, oh, yeah, what kind of podcasts do you do? And I was really hesitant, but I finally said, well, I do a podcast on UFOs. And he says, oh, man, I was so into that years ago. And he was at every convention and all over. So it's just kind of funny. And he's actually going to be sitting in for one of my shows. And he actually lives in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where I spend the summer. So that'll be a lot of fun to have him there. So, again, I want to thank everyone that watches the show. Next week, before I forget, we're going to have Darcy Weir. He's going to be talking about his film about the Pascagoula incident that was recently released. And so, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So excited to have you on. I listened to you, and my good friend Chris Lito, he interviewed you, and I thought, wow, I got to get this wonderful lady on my show, and I'm so thrilled that you agreed to come on.
Nice. It was so fun being on with Chris because we had, the Nile behind us, so that was a good memory to have.
Oh yeah, that was a great time you all had there, I heard.
Yeah. Oh, it was
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, amazing. So anyway, Sarah, so if you would, can you give your back? You have quite a background, and I mean, you were actually involved in the UAP Task Force, which is really amazing. But you have astronomy was a love of yours to begin with. Why don't you tell us? And I understand how you got caught the UFO bug, so to speak, was by a special series on TV.
Yes.
The truth is
Yeah,
out
I'm
there.
actually
Yeah, yeah.
surprised I didn't have my X. I do have an X-Files shirt I debated putting on. How much did I want to nerd out, right? So I actually fell in love with the stars at an early age. I grew up on a farm in rural Missouri, and one of my brothers actually got a telescope for Christmas when I was, I don't even know, second or third grade, and we went out and looked at the moon, and I had a million questions. I annoyed everybody, and I fell in love. And so I just kept looking up, and I, of course, still do. I ended up with a degree from Missouri State in Springfield, and that's technically in physics on paper, but so legally it's physics, but it's actually astrophysics.
Mm,
And my master's is in countering weapons of mass destruction, and actually, both of my degrees are from the same place, so Missouri State. So that's pretty cool. Um,
yeah.
yeah, my career's been a curvy road. I have been very fortunate, and I know I still have a lot of my career left, but I've been at the right seat at the right time, a lot of projects in my life. So I first started out at an NRO, National Reconnaissance Office ground station. And so I did a lot of tasking for satellites, for classified satellites, for,
Mm,
I might say, NTM, National Technical Means. I think the acronym might have actually changed by now, but it's a habit, so it's still going to be NTM forever.
okay.
So I did a lot of satellite imagery most of my career, and I ended up going over to NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency,
Mm.
and was a kind of bounced around there. I
Wow.
was an image scientist for a long time there. I fell in love with something called SAR imagery, synthetic aperture radar. It's kind of like sonar on a boat. So it's send and receive instead of photons receiving from the camera lens here. It's a send and receive type sensor. So a lot of math, a lot of science behind it, and people don't like to look at it either because it uses a little bit of, we call it blobology. So it's good job security. And the SAR community is amazing. So, anyways, ended up an image analyst for a little bit, and I was supported the Middle East division, Levant, and ended up getting recruited in the research director at NGA. So there I was doing something called bistatics. So I could really nerd out if people want to start geeking out about RF energy. Um, but with bistatics, instead of send and receive from the same sensor, it's send and receive from two different places, and send and receive from a different, like, send versus, or transmit versus receive. So that was around the time when I kind of forced myself maybe onto supporting the UAP Task Force. So
Hmm.
I supported it from a very small corner at NGA, and kind of like, so for those that aren't familiar with Task Force, you have your overall people, like your seniors, I'll call it, on the task force, and then you have other people that work under those, and I call them like minions. So I was a minion for NGA, and there was a handful of us that volunteered to be on it. So that was a pretty cool perspective. I never really got to do much on the overall, well, nothing really on the overall task force. And then after I left the task force, I ended up on a joint duty assignment, JDA, at ODNI at National Counterproliferation and Biosecurity Center. My career is a mouthful of
Wow.
things. And I was a nuclear counterproliferation strategist. And I covered global issues and eventually had to tackle Russia when Putin invaded, because we had our Russian person ended up leaving a few weeks before the invasion of Ukraine. So I ended up
Hmm.
ingesting that for a little bit before I ended up leaving. But I was a country, China campaign lead, and covered all kinds of other nuclear issues around the world. Yeah, and that curvy road has now led me to working at the Army. So as of
Wow.
just like a couple weeks ago, I started a new job. I left the Pentagon and I work for the Army Corps of Engineers now. So I'm a scientist for them, and I'm still figuring out what I'm doing, but I'm happy to be there and supporting an organization that I have already worked with and given a lot of my blood, sweat, and tears to. So I'm very honored.
Wow. Wow, very impressive. Very impressive. So I have, so many questions. I'd like, I could go off on the nuclear thing where I'd love to ask a bunch of things about that,
It was
because I think that's
very
like the
fun,
genie you can't put
hard.
back in the bottle type of
Yeah.
situation. But just for now, when you talked about the satellite imagery and all that, but I've just wondered, and now I can ask this question by someone that might know. Do we have the capability, let's just say, devil's advocate, that there is something coming and visiting us from out there in through our atmosphere and down to visit us? Aren't there satellites that would detect that happening? And if so, do we? I mean, I've heard people say that, yeah, they don't even, those things are happening all the time, but they don't even, they discount them because they're not a threat
Mhm.
type of thing.
I mean,
What can you tell me about?
I've seen stuff. I have seen things on satellite sensors. So yeah, I mean, we do have stuff that'll detect it, and sometimes, they go undetected, and I don't know why. I'm assuming maybe they're too fast. I don't know, but sometimes things are undetected and they just kind of pop up. But yeah, I've seen classified data that we can capture them. Them is in the unknown.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of classified and all this talk that you hear right now of things, more transparency possibly. Do you feel like that might happen? Like we may get more information through?
I I am an optimist, so I'm always hopeful, and my answer to that is always yes, because I'm here for a reason and hopes that that does happen. But reality, I also believe yes to that. There has been a profound leap that has happened just in the past few months. Like we'll even go to 6 months. And so leaps and bounds, and this is becoming a more normal topic to talk about. So I really do think that some sort of more transparency and disclosure is coming, hopeful for soon. I don't know a date. I'm not one of those that'll be like
Yeah.
in this date and this year, but I do hope that it's going to happen soon.
I've heard, I know Lou Elizondo had mentioned a bunch of times that 2025 is going to be the big year, and so
Yeah.
far, he might be right. He might be
Yeah.
right. I mean,
So I
it's
mean,
exciting.
look what's happened so far this year. We have so many amazing military that have come forward, former military, that you can't deny what they're saying and corroborating. And how incredible is that? And how brave of these people as well.
And we off air, I mentioned that I'm going to have Dr. Blitz, John Blitz, and he's a friend of yours. You know him well, so that's amazing. He's coming up on this show on March
Hmm.
18th, I believe it is, but somewhere around there.
So
But
I can't wait to watch another of his interviews. So I'm glad he's coming on.
yeah, yeah. So what's it been like for you after, I guess, say, who interviewed you first when it came to the UAP topic?
Interview on camera was Matt Ford.
Oh, Matt Ford, yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
Matt Ford was the first one that I came forward on.
wow. And did were you approached, or did you how did all that happen? Because
Yeah.
all of a sudden I'm
Well,
like, here's Sarah Gamm, like, oh my God,
yeah.
someone new, interesting. So
It was a little terrifying, to be honest. The UAP community, as you are well versed by now, is small. Oh, and here's Krypton. Um,
your
oh
cat's
gosh.
Krypton.
So
Yeah.
the UAP community is small, and up until, Matt's show, I was always behind a classified wall, supporting everything. And so I got to know a lot of people. Met Lou back in the days. Well, I didn't meet him in person, but I met him virtually from the task force days.
Hmm.
And so I got to know quite a few people behind the scenes, and then at one point, I forgot how it came about now, but I ended up meeting James Fox, and he said, "Can you be on camera?" And I was like, "Sure, that sounds awesome." Sorry, guys, here's Krypton again. You guys haven't seen him for a while. Um, and so the interview with James Fox happened so quickly that after I was done with it and going home, I was like, "Oh my gosh, what did I just do? This isn't a classified wall anymore." And so then I remember reaching out to Lou and being like, "Oh my gosh, what did I just do?" And I was like, I was brought to this for a reason. So the interview with James happened in March of 2023, so almost 2 years ago. So
Oh
I
wow.
had a while to sit on what I was going to do and how I was going to come out, because my name was going to be out there. I'm so sorry. My
Oh
name was
no,
going to
no,
be
it's
out there no matter what.
we
Um,
love cats and dogs, so yeah.
Okay, his tail is so long. I'm sure he'll be back. Um, yeah, so it was kind of a whirlwind of a realization. I kind of didn't know what to expect after I finally decided to come forward. I had met Matt in person earlier last year, and he wanted me on sooner, and I said no at the time. And so it
Hmm.
took me a little bit to eventually say yes.
And how has the feedback been? Yeah, it's a great
Uh-huh.
cat. How's the
Oh,
feedback
thank
been?
you.
Have you had any ridicule at all for as
Yeah, I definitely have. I come here. I I mean, I've gotten all kinds of things. Thankfully, no death threats, no
I
threats
should
to
hope
my
not.
life like I've heard of other people getting. But I mean, people try to slander me and call me a crazy cat lady, and obviously I own it. I mean, I am quite okay with that. I grew up in a small town where people talked about each other, and I'm used to slander. I'm used to all that. So I grew up with thick skin, and I've had some issues at my last job with something. Um,
Hmm.
my security team, I am very open with them every time I do an interview, and even though I don't need to talk to them when I do one, I still let them know. And something came up one day, and no one knows why or who did it or or the orchestrator behind things. So but yeah, I've gotten quite a bit. I've lost friends during this process. I have
Really?
also been a little paranoid about, travel and stuff. So from I'll call it OPSEC, operational security standpoint. So like when I travel, it's just kind of different because of some of the messages that I have received. I'm wondering if they know, where I live, so I don't post something when I'm traveling while I'm actively gone in case somebody comes to the house and does something. So I don't wish this on anyone. And no matter what I say, people don't listen. I have gotten bullied. I have gotten slandered. I have gotten you name it from so many people, including others that I worked with while I was in the system, not quite on the task force, but working in the system of supporting the task force. So,
Well, let me
um,
get this straight. Is it people in the UFO community? Is that what's happening? And is it because they think that that the UAP task force was hiding something and they're taking it out on people involved in it? Is that, or what do you think
yeah,
that comes from?
I honestly don't know. I know some of the things that I've heard from people, of what was said about me. Some folks just never listen to my interviews because I don't claim to be on the official task force. I claim to support it from a very small corner. I likely didn't see like I probably saw a fraction of the data that was provided to the overall task force. And I openly admit a lot of that stuff, right? But that doesn't matter because words will still get jumbled. And I don't know why the topic is so divided of people and why people turn on each other. I've been trying to figure it out because I'm definitely a victim. Um,
I'm
and
sorry to hear that.
I hope it changes because like we're all on the same planet together. We're all here. This is a global issue. This isn't a US issue. This is happening worldwide to our planet revolving around the same sun, the same star, going around the same, in the Milky Way. So I don't get why it's so divided and why there's so much turmoil, and I'll even call it hate against some people.
Well, I blame a part of that on like the social media aspect of things because that just it seems like it's a machine to divide us in so many ways. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
much of you're good, you're bad, the broad brushstrokes and all that in every aspect. It doesn't matter. This is one of the things that I've been really optimistic about, though, because when it came to the hearings, it was bipartisan. There was AOC um, and Matt Gaetz both talking openly in the same room, who normally are pitted against each other. It was
Mhm.
great to see, and it is bipartisan. But I'm really
Yeah.
sorry to hear that you suffered any type of attacks or
Yeah.
anything, and
Thank
it's
you.
really
I'm
unfounded in my opinion.
I'm excited for what's to come though, because I think and this is just a feeling, so I don't know anything, but I think what's coming is actually going to open people's eyes a little bit more. So, like, the dry shites out there are going to have to admit that maybe they were wrong, or like, I don't even want people to admit they were wrong. I just want them to see the truth and see some of the things that I have seen, some of the stuff that shouldn't be classified from the public. So, I'm hopeful that this new task force is going to be providing some of the data that I unfortunately can't talk about, but I have seen with my own eyes, and I don't know why some of it is classified.
Right. And um, like I think I heard Luna say it the other day, something along the lines where, "Hey, we're adults. We can take this, whatever it is." And I'm all about the truth and transparency, and I don't care where it comes from. Politically, I just would like to know. I think we all deserve to know. And I've said many times in the show, if they've known all along, they've got a lot of splaining to do. There's if it's
Mhm.
been something known for, let's just go back to 47 during that whole time back then. If it's been known all this time in some segment
Yeah.
of our government or whatever, then there's a lot to apologize for keeping it from us this long.
Yeah. And then like thinking back to 1947, thinking, putting yourself in their shoes, like world events that were happening at that time and to keep
World
things
War
on a
II.
hush
Yeah.
hush basis. And
Yeah.
I get it. And then it just kept on getting buried and buried and buried. And I mean, I've even now talked to people because of, what I mentioned in the beginning of the UAP community is small, and I've been able to meet a lot of folks. And I've been able to hear a lot of stories now of folks touching and helping retrieve crafts, and unfortunately some soldiers passing away from some of the radiation issues. And um, it is so unfortunate what has been covered up, and there's no reason for it now.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the big questions. It's why I do this show. Are we alone or not? Basically, that's one of the biggest questions we could have. Is there life
Yeah.
after death? Are we alone? And
Yeah,
is,
but I
one
don't
of the
think it's a matter of are we alone anymore? Because we aren't. We've known that for decades. Presidents for decades and decades have talked about UFOs out in the open in some of their speeches, and we know that we're not alone. And now it's more of a question of why is it still a secret? The truth is here. It is out, and it just shouldn't be a secret anymore.
and how about what are they? That's the big question. Like
Yeah.
there's no question when people ask me if I believe in UFOs. I said, well, it's really nothing to believe in. They're here. I mean, it's nothing to believe or not believe in that UFOs are here. But the question is, what are they? I mean, that's the big question, I think. You know,
Yeah.
and what do they want? That type of
Mhm.
thing. So yeah. So you've actually seen something. I've kind of posed these questions to people like Lou Elizondo that you can't talk about. And when it comes to classified, I totally understand that. But you've seen things. I guess I can ask the question in this way that have convinced you that there's really something to this.
Oh, absolutely. Um, Well, when I first saw, I'm trying to think back. It was a video, military drone, like a MQ-9 type. I don't remember what platform it was, but it was like an MQ-9 drone video. The first one I saw, where I went through my scientists, my analysts, like Rolodex, flipping through, like, is it balloons? Is it this? Is it that? And then all of a sudden, something started maneuvering, and I just went, I need to rewind this. And you kind of have a moment. Lou did explain it in his book really well of like, what? I've known we're not alone. I'm such a huge X-Files fan, and astrophysics in college. I also grew up religious, and so it was once in a while somebody would ask, like, "Well, you believe in God, but you're doing this astronomy stuff. So, are you still religious?" And like, why is it both? Why would God only make Earth and make us here an infinite amount of space? Why would we be selfish enough to think that it's only us? Why can't there be a diverse amount of civilizations out there, just like what we are here on Earth.
Right.
But anyway, so yeah, that kind of it was an interesting moment seeing the first video where it was really stumped me. Where you're like, okay, this is what unidentified looks like.
Yeah. That's exciting. And do you have faith that someday we'll see videos like that? They'll be released?
I do. I mean, I have to be confident that, all of this effort, everything I've gone through it's not going to be for nothing.
And Lou did
I'm
talk about,
hopeful. Yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to talk about how hopeful and, ramble on.
Lou had this thing when he was on my show they talked about, and I've reminded him, but I forgot he was on recently and I forgot to remind him again. But he talked about a 23-minute video. Are you familiar? Have you heard that? Anything about that?
So I know what you're talking about, and I definitely have not watched 23 minutes of one video, at work.
Yeah. Okay. But according to him, that was going to get released. And I'm just hopefully that will, because supposedly that there was there was multiple
Uh-huh.
crafts going on. Was that your cat again? Or?
Yes, it sure was. Good guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, interesting. Now getting, changing gears a little bit, back into nuclear. Um, I've told this story many times. Probably people get sick of hearing it, but I had, before I was really into this topic, there was someone at my
Yeah.
house in the 90s, talking to me about life insurance, a broker. Basically said he was part of a task force in the Air Force during Vietnam, trying to figure out what the UFOs were during napalming. And then he talked
Wow.
about nuclear. He said they're very, very interested in our nuclear weapons, our nuclear power plants, and on and on and on. He went on and on about that all the way back, then in the 90s. So, what is your? I know you're. I don't know if you've looked into any of that or not. I had Robert
Yeah.
Salas on recently. He talks about uh, that situation back in the 60s where nuclear warheads were disarmed,
Yeah.
10 of them separately.
Um, yeah, so that was actually how I first got involved.
Oh,
Was I in July of 2019, I had graduated with my master's in CWMD. And sometime a few months later, I came across a classified report that discussed somewhere in the world that some unidentified objects were witnessed at a nuclear missile site. I'm so sorry. I have loud random hiccups.
that's
and
okay.
and so um I I thought put me in. Like my astrophysics background, X-Files, like my love for X-Files for my entire life, and so I just thought put me in, coach. So I ended up, I don't remember how, but I found I've talked about a chat room and like a SharePoint site. So I found a chat room that, come to find out, it actually had been created like 2 or 3 days before this. So it was very new, and
Wow.
the chat room wasn't official task force stuff. The SharePoint site wasn't task force, but task force people collaborated there and utilized it, but it wasn't. And so I just wanted to specify those are two different buckets. So I found this chat room, and I am like, oh, I have this degree, like I feel so fancy, and so kind of started meeting people and chatting, and then eventually my deputy director in research at NGA was asking for people to be on to support the task force, the NGA lead of the task force. And long story short, I worked my way in. I didn't accept no for an answer. So I was like, I already know people. I know that. I know this person. I know that person. I know this database. And so I didn't accept no for an answer. So that was how I officially supported the task force.
Hmm.
Um, but it started with a nuclear site, and I didn't realize at the time the history, the decades worth of history that has been known for these. And of course, since then, I have learned quite a bit, including from some missileers, some Air Force missileers, and hearing some of their accounts in person. And that's just because, like, I worked with a missileer at one point and was like, "Oh, by the way, did you ever have any like power glitches or something?" And um Yeah, so it wasn't like I was a part of the task force and went out and interviewed, so I don't want people to think that.
Right. Are you familiar with Mario Woods by chance?
I'm not. The name's familiar
Okay.
though.
Yeah, he's been on the show a number of times, and also a friend. We meet up now and then, but he had a situation, and I'm trying to remember the Ellsworth something Air Force Base, and it's in South Dakota. And anyway, he had an event happen there where there was uh, an object right over the warhead. He was in security. Basically, uh, the person driving the truck froze, and he was trying to get him to move or react or anything. He was just sitting there like that. They were parked. He saw a being. He doesn't, he didn't want to say that, but he saw a being. And then next thing you know, he woke up 14 miles away from that area. They were looking for him all night. He didn't know how he got there. And when he was on the ground when he woke up, looking up at a dam, didn't know where the heck he was. And he sees the truck. He gets back in the truck, and the guy is still frozen on the steering wheel like this.
I Thank you.
Eh,
I actually had heard that, so I appreciate the story and hearing it again. Because wow,
yeah, it's
how
quite a,
terrifying.
I know. And that, but the thing that he said, which was really crazy, and I had him bring it, I want to hear this again because it sounds nuts, is that
Mhm.
the warheads would become active, and they would put their truck on the blast door and leave it in neutral, hoping that the truck would, if the blast door went off, that the truck would drop down inside and jam anything from
Yeah.
going off. Which anyway, uh, it all sounds. There was also a case in Russia. I'm sure you probably heard of that, where they were activated. The warheads were
Yeah.
activated,
Yeah,
and
because Russia thought it was us.
mm,
Like they
yeah.
thought somehow we did that. The US figured out how to do this, and yeah.
Why do we even have those things?
Yep. Uh-huh. I will have, as even though I have a degree in it, my heart still doesn't understand war, and it doesn't understand hate, and like I know they're important to have deterrence so that people don't get on to me about that. I am all for deterrence and surviving, but
Yeah.
yeah, I hope there is a day where we no longer have any type of WMD.
Well, it was sort of heading that direction. I know we don't want to get way off on the topic, but it was sort of at one time. I forget who was in office at the time, but there was like a decommissioning plan. Maybe it was all the way back to Reagan. I don't remember, but there was some type of plan where there would be at least a major drop in
Mhm.
in the
Well, and
weapons.
the Obama administration as well had that to go down to 0.
Yeah, that would be it. It's the only trouble is it's like someone could be holding their cards. That's a problem with a situation like that. Like we
Yeah,
could dispose of all of them, and then a third world country may have developed one, and the
yeah.
end of the world will
Well, and
happen
there's
anyway.
in the world that we're in, unfortunately, there's always going to be an actor out there, a lone wolf or some type of adversary, till we could all figure out how to get along.
Yeah, that would be nice. I think we should do that. um, so someone asked, this is kind of an unusual question. I don't know if you've ever been asked this before, but when you're looking at, people talk about, for instance, there's Matthew Roberts been on the show a few times. He was observing like videos firsthand. I believe it was the gimbal UFO. He was watching it over and over again when he was on board the ship, and he felt like he had what's called a hitchhiker effect from it, like things happening to him in his life. Are you familiar with that term? And someone asked if you ever had anything like that.
I have not at work. What I don't think we've covered yet. I'm also a psychic medium. I don't know if you wanted to cover that in this show, but I have to mention that in order to answer this truthfully.
Okay. All right.
Um, so I have had a hitchhiker before when I traveled to another country. To actually, it was in the Middle East. So I have had a hitchhiker not doing UAP stuff. So I have experienced what it is and what happens. But from the UAP, all the support that I have done over the years, I've never had something from that hitchhike with me.
Okay, so now we're going to hear about the psychic medium.
I mean, we
So,
can't.
and it's not going to take away from your credibility as far as I'm concerned.
Oh no, I
Yeah.
mean, it's who I am, and I have. If I'm not here to preach to people to believe in everything that I say, and if there's one person that resonates with what I'm saying, that's why I've said it. So, yeah, so I don't expect people to believe everything, and sometimes it's still a hard pill for me to swallow, and it's happening to me or happening to one of my best friends. So I get being skeptic. I'm a skeptic. I'm still a scientist, and so I will be a skeptic for life, which the world needs. We need
Yeah.
the questions, and we need that. We just need an open mind with the
Hmm.
skepticism.
I agree. So what is it like? What can you give me an example
Of what?
of of you saying that you're psychic? You have
Oh,
this psychic ability.
well, when it first happened, it was terrifying. I didn't know what was happening to me. I needed help. I didn't know. Um, yeah, it freaked me out. It freaked me out pretty badly. So, but my whole life I've seen ghosts, and I have had loved ones. Like one of my grandmas passed away when I was fairly young, and she would come to me in dreams, and now I know that those are called vivid dreams. And they are like you and I talking here. It's like a core memory, except it's not. It's in a dream. And she would come to me when I needed. And that progressed to a lot of other things happening. I had a near death experience in May of 2012. And
Whoa.
after that, like a lot of near death experience stories, stuff starts happening around you and you have different abilities. And I started having psychic, I'll call it abilities. I don't know. I don't know what the right word is, but I started having psychic visions
Mhm.
and some hearing. Like I would hear a car crash, and it ended up being like later that day. Unfortunately, my best friend got in a car wreck, and he's fine. But so things started happening and progressing to where it got to a point I really was freaking out. And I actually enjoy telling this story because it goes to show how my two worlds have absolutely collided. So I got an appointment with a psychic medium, and she wasn't too far away from me. I had it was like a couple months out in advance because she was booked and she's busy. So the day I had the appointment, I was briefing the director of National Security Agency, the DERNSA, and he was a four-star general. And so I left briefing the DERNSA to go to my psychic medium appointment. And at that appointment, my teacher said, "You could do what I'm doing. They're showing me you here in my seat." And I was like, "I'm in. What you just did for me and gave me healing, and I could be taught how to like figure out how to harness this and utilize it for good, and help people." I was like, I just have to get through grad school first. After that, I'm all yours. Um, so yeah, so it was kind of a cool day. My one of my career goals was to brief a four-star general, and that happened. And then I found out I was also a psychic medium in the same day.
Holy smokes. Wow. I have to just say something I've never shared, but it's similar to what you're talking about. And people can believe it or not, but when I was extremely close to my grandmother. She lived in Georgia and I grew up in southern Maine. And so she basically passed away from cancer. I was really upset and worried. And my father said, you can't can't get out of school for the funeral. He went down to the funeral. And so that happened and all that. And then I had this dream that was so realistic with my grandmother, and the wind was like blowing, and So
Got
she,
goosebumps.
I, I said to my father when he came back, I said, "Oh, I had this dream about Nana." I called her Nana, and I said she always had her hair down, and I said she had her hair up. The wind was blowing, and I saw in this pink gown, and she had pearls on, and she was saying to me, "Stop worrying, I'm okay. Everything's all right." That's what she said to me. And my father's face turned white. I'd never seen him this happen to him before. He said she was buried in her pink wedding dress. She had pearls on, and her hair was up. I mean, what are the odds of all that? So that really happened as a child, and it was the most vivid dream I had at the time. You know,
Yeah.
I've had
And you
more
still
vivid dreams
remember it,
since then.
right?
God, I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That is when like people like a medium, when you get goosebumps, it's validation from spirit confirming or also saying hello. So I feel like your grandma's also
Well, she
very present
was
right
she
now with
was
you.
the sweetest woman.
Mhm.
That all the good in my family came from her. I always say that. But anyway, yeah, we got a little bit off of the topic, but it's still interesting. I hope people, listeners, find it kind of interesting.
Well,
That
I mean, it's not really that off topic because the spirit world and UAP are one. They're married. So, like there's all the stories of telepathic communication from NHI. And so it's really not that off topic. It's just a little hop over from what we were discussing.
yeah, and so it's such a mysterious world, isn't it? In general, I mean, there's just so many things that we absolutely have no clue about, and you
Yep.
know, as someone as an astrophysicist, I mean, you must really be open to all that because there's new discoveries all the time.
Oh my
And
gosh,
the
it's so
universe, we
exciting.
have absolutely no idea, you know, how
Mhm.
this, we've never seen that before. You hear that all the time.
Yeah.
And the James Webb, that's another thing I think is really exciting for what we're going to learn from that. And there's something
Yeah.
in the future supposedly planned that's going to be out there too, right? Something's going to be launched in so many years.
Oh, I don't know about that. I haven't been keeping track. Oh, what have I missed
Okay.
out on? Oh,
I may be totally wrong on that. I was actually saw the James
I'm
Webb
gonna
when it
have to
was
Google after we get off of here
yeah.
and find out what I like talk to some of my NASA friends and see what they
Well,
got
I might
cooking.
it's misinformation most likely.
Oh, that's so funny. Don't doubt yourself. But no, you're totally right though. Like I was on the Egypt trip with Ross Coulthart and JP Haig and a group of us. Every time we would leave somewhere, the first thing any of us would say was we know nothing. We don't
Yeah.
know anything about our history. We don't know. It was unbelievable how much we truly don't know. And then we're relearning stuff now. And from some of it was likely like a place that we went was over 50,000 years old, predated the Egyptians.
And that's
Egyptians
just
came there and used the space. And same as like the Great Pyramid of Giza, they don't know how old it is. They just gave a date to make people happy, but
yeah,
it
because you
likely is
can't
like double
date
or triple.
rocks. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
nothing
yeah. Um,
you can't carbon date a
it's
rock. Yeah.
it is so cool though to know how much we need to learn. And from a science aspect, the more data, the better. The more data, like how cool is it to be able to change the history books?
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, okay. Sorry, I have tea sitting
Oh
open.
dear. Yeah.
Um, so I loved Egypt from an aspect of opening your mind to so much. Like I wasn't the same person coming back from when I went just because of so many mind changing and then amazing people. Like all the folks there are just like we very quickly became family. But anyways, that is off topic. It's really cool to be alive right now and to see the advancements of quantum physics. Like we are on the
Oh my
brink of
goodness.
really starting to understand quantum and, I mean, AI, how it's like when AI first started coming out so many years ago, we just, Terminator and Skynet, and
Yeah.
now it's kind of real. And the UAP topic never was a common thing people would discuss, and woo-woo stuff and being a psychic medium. And and now it's such like a common thing, and no one cares I'm a medium at my job. Not one person.
Awesome. Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, as far as history goes, it's like we have amnesia. We know so little about
Yeah.
the past, and we always think that we're on the apex of knowledge and things like that. But you think of some of the things that they did. For instance, building the pyramids. I mean, that's just a crazy thing to try to fathom.
Yeah.
But yeah, we know. And as far as time goes, it's just a little grain of sand of time 50,000 years ago compared to 4 billion years. So we know
Mhm.
very little. But
Yeah.
it's interesting, and I still think that we're going to, like you say, rewrite the history books because we're going to be discovering things. I mean, can you imagine what's underground that we haven't found yet? I
Yeah.
mean, it's
In the oceans?
in the ocean,
Yeah.
crazy.
In
Yeah,
the water. There's
yeah.
gonna be so much in the water, and yeah, and caves, we're still discovering caves, and some of the caves have artifacts, human artifacts and stuff in them. And I mean, we got to see in one of the museums in Egypt, there was flint tools that they somehow dated to 1 million years ago.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
a
So that
million
would
year
be
old
the way
flint
they
tool,
could.
and some of them
Yeah.
were small and delicate too. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean that they can do that if they find them in sediment, in the right type of sediment, they can date that
Yeah.
way if they're found, as a
Yeah, in the
it's
geologic
amazing.
layers. It's just it is really neat to be alive right now and to witness a global awakening happening and all this mass information. And just it's pretty cool to witness.
Yeah, and the whole quantum thing you're talking about is, I mean, I know there's that new chip that Google has, and that's kind of scary. I can't remember the name of that right off the bat, but it's just amazing how and scary. Like we talked earlier about the bad actors. That that could be an AI situation too, into
Yeah.
the self-replicating destroying machines or something.
Mhm.
There's a lot to be
Yeah.
fearful for, but we can grow in leaps and bounds. I mean, I saw a picture the other day someone sent me from Facebook. Um, was the flyer, the Wilbur and Oval Rights flyer, a picture of that, and below that was the man walking on the moon. It was only 66 years apart. I mean, that's just an amazing
It's incredible. Hmm.
a leap. But things have to go in order. I mean, we build upon what we build upon. We don't just make
Hmm.
a big jump. But I think that AI could make the big jumps, with the abilities it has.
Yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely. Especially figuring out like quantum computing. So marry those two together,
Yeah.
that the world's going to be kind of scary.
Well, I heard that they're talking about computer power of something that will take a few seconds to do that would take a supercomputer 10,000 years to do.
Yeah,
Those are the type of
I
numbers you're
have heard
hearing
the
out
same.
there.
Hmm. Yep.
So, I mean, you try
It
to
is
fathom that. Yeah.
crazy
Yeah. Yeah.
and exciting.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So right now, the position you have with the Army has absolutely nothing to do with anything to do with any more of the UAP stuff. But you
No,
still,
not at all.
yeah, but do you still have an interest in it?
Oh, of course I do. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
talking to you for a reason, right?
that's right. Yeah,
I love it. It has been a passion my whole life. I love hearing people's stories that they send me. Um,
hmm,
and especially when I help validate somebody, when I share something on one of these interviews and they're like, "Oh my gosh, that happened to me. I know I'm not crazy now." And
yeah,
I'm here for a reason, and all my worlds have collided. Worlds being scientist, and then also was brought up religious, and now spiritual. Like everything is colliding in one right now, and I'm happy to be in my seat that I'm in, and I have a front row view. Um, it's
yeah.
yeah. Anyways, it's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, very exciting. Yeah. So with your knowledge in like astronomy and all that, um, how do you, in your mind, you always hear that people that are scientists, they say, well, there's absolutely no way they could get here from there. And my answer to that is maybe there's something in physics that we don't know that they discovered, that type of thing. And what do you,
Oh,
yeah, I mean, is that kind of your thoughts in a way?
yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of the times, what we do, because we are here on our own planet, we understand our own laws of physics and our rules. What we don't think about is putting ourselves in their shoes because they already understand way more than what we do. Obviously, because they get here quick and they have ships and whatever. So we have to think about something from their perspective. They have more advanced knowledge of science and physics than us, and maybe biologics as well. And so when you think about maybe wormholes are a real thing. It's a theory, right? Maybe
Hmm.
they figured them out. And portals, we hear about portals all the time, especially like if anybody watches Skinwalker Ranch, there's portals out there. And so like maybe they figure out how to get in and out and utilize gravity and plasma and time, and because we make time real here on Earth, and so they don't know what it is, so they know how to manipulate it maybe. um
I
there's a
think there is
various
something to
amount of
that.
things
Hmm,
yeah, so it's a
sorry.
lot of speculation that I have, but we have to think about outside of Earth, and our laws of physics might not apply to them because they figured out what's outside of those rules.
Right. That you just said the manipulation of time, that kind of comes up a lot in people's experiences, the possibility of it. And, I mean, I could cite a couple of things, but still that does come up. And, but what are your thoughts on, some people are saying, well, they're possibly interdimensional. That's another thing. And that actually, checks a couple of boxes of some of the things that people have experienced that like, oh, well, it blinked in and out, was there and blinked back in and blinked back out and moved and all that. There's a time travel theory. Dr. Michael Masters talks a lot about that. I don't know if you've heard of him, but yeah, so there are all these different theories that I think are fascinating. And I think it might be some of this and some of that.
Mhm. No, I agree, and they definitely are interdimensional. I like that phrase. I have had a being visit me in my house a few years ago. So, and a portal thing opened up in my bedroom, and it looked through it, and then it went away. And so, and then with my spiritual practice, I do work with some different entities as well. So I know that they speak telepathically and that they are interdimensional. So there's no doubt in my mind about what you just said.
Wow. The portal, I wasn't expecting that. That's interesting. So, yeah, what was that like? We have to jump off in a couple minutes here, but what was that like?
Well, being a medium, it's no big thing for things to visit me in the nighttime. But so I wasn't really freaked out, but it was a shock. I was a little scared at first and then realized like nothing would come because I protect my house and put protection up, so nothing would come in that I wouldn't allow. So it was really cool. At first I was like, do you need some water? Do you need a pillow? What do you need? And so it just kept pacing back and forth, and it had this like bright crystal-y type sword, and this portal thing opened up. It was like a pinkish color, and it stopped and it looked at it, and it was like it was communicating, and then it went away, and I was like, I'm okay, I'm gonna go back to sleep now.
Oh my God, I don't know how you could do that.
Well, that's like a medium though. It's I have a best friend on the other side as well. He's in heaven, so he also likes to mess with me once in a while.
Wow. Wow. Well, this has been wonderful. It's been a really nice experience to talk to you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you
And
so much,
are
and
you
thanks to
out there
everybody
and
who's watching.
where people aren't going to attack you, hopefully, but are
Yeah.
you like out there in social media at all talking about this?
I am. Yeah. Instagram is Sarah Grace Warrior, and Facebook is Sarah Grace Psychic Medium.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Again, it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. This has
All right,
been
everyone.
fun.
Thank you. We'll be back next week with Darcy Weir. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.